Life as a cop in the city doesn't just harden you, it armors you in cynicism, thicker than a bulletproof vest. That was me, Lena, a 35-year-old lieutenant turned private eye, carrying around a baggage of distrust larger than the cases I solved. My beat? Cheating spouses and human deceit. Not exactly the backdrop for a love story, huh? Then came Michael, Mr. Contemporary Art, into my life like a fresh brushstroke on a worn-out canvas. We met at this art show in New York. The place was packed with the kind of people who use words like postmodern and avant-garde without a hint of irony. I was out of my element, feeling more like a fish on a bicycle than a fish in water. Interesting piece, isn't it? That was Michael, breaking the ice as he stood next to me, gazing at what looked like a pile of trash artfully arranged on a pedestal. I glanced at him, then back at the art. If by interesting you mean I've seen better-looking garbage in an alley, then yeah, fascinating. He laughed, a rich, hearty sound that made more than a few heads turn. I'm Michael, he said, extending his hand. Lena. And before you ask, no, I don't get modern art. I'm just here to support a friend. That's refreshing. Most people here pretend to see things that aren't there. Ah, so you're an art truther? Our banter flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, we were grabbing coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Michael was 40, looked like he stepped out of a GQ magazine, and had the manners of a bygone era. Fast forward 6 months, and I'm head over heels, living in a whirlwind romance that felt too good to be true. Michael had this old-world charm about him, reading me poetry, taking me to the most exquisite exhibitions, and treating me like I was the only woman in the world. One evening, in the middle of Central Park under a canopy of stars, Michael went down on one knee. Lena, will you marry me? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Hell yes. The engagement was a blur of happiness. I found myself daydreaming about a future filled with love, kids, and laughter. But you know what they say about things too good to be true. My first reality check came in the form of Michael's mother, Evelyn. She was the ice queen incarnate, scrutinizing me with a look that could curdle milk. So, you're a detective. Isn't that a bit unladylike? She asked during our first dinner together. Depends on what century your definition of ladylike comes from, I shot back, not missing a beat. Michael gave me a tight smile, but I could see the warning in his eyes. Lena's one of the best detectives in the city, Mom. Evelyn sniffed. I suppose that's one way to meet men. I clenched my jaw, forcing a smile. And here I thought it was to stop crime and serve justice. Silly me. Dinner passed in a tense truce, with Michael playing peacemaker. As we left, he squeezed my hand. She'll come around, Lena. Give it time. Evelyn's visits were frequent, each one a little inspection tour of our life. It was a Tuesday evening, barely 2 weeks into our marriage, when she dropped by unannounced, her arrival heralding a chill in the air. Lena, darling, she began, her voice dripping with a condescension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I see you're still clinging to your little job. I had hoped marriage would have made a proper lady out of you. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, the knife in my hand suddenly feeling very appealing for reasons other than cooking. Evelyn, where I come from, we call this making a living. You should try it sometime instead of living off others. Her lips tightened, but she maintained her composure. Michael was raised with certain expectations. It's not too late to choose a more respectable profession. Something less masculine. Respectable? You mean like being a professional busybody? I retorted, not bothering to mask the bite in my voice. No thanks, I'll stick to catching cheaters and liars. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club going? Michael walked in just then, his timing as impeccable as ever. What's going on here? He asked, looking from me to his mother. Your wife was just explaining her career choice to me. It seems I've underestimated the thrill of working with criminals, Evelyn said, her tone saccharine. Michael sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Mom, Lena's job is important to her. It's who she is. And Lena. He turned to me, a pleading look in his eyes. Please, let's not do this now. I wanted to argue, to tell him that his mother was crossing lines she shouldn't even be seeing, but I held back. This was his mother, after all. Fine, I muttered, turning back to my vegetables with more force than necessary. The evenings following Evelyn's visits were always tense. Michael would become distant, retreating into a shell I couldn't crack. It was clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One such evening, after a particularly grueling visit from Evelyn, who had criticized everything from my cooking to the way I folded towels, I confronted Michael. "Why don't you ever stand up for me? Your mother treats me like I'm the dirt under her shoe, and you just let her. What kind of marriage is this?" Michael looked at me, weary. "Lena, she's old, set in her ways. What do you want me to do? Disown her?" "No, I want you to have my back. To tell her she can't walk all over me, us. Is that too much to ask?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it some time. She'll come around." But she didn't. And neither did he. The divide grew, Evelyn's disdain and Michael's inaction wedging a gap between us that felt insurmountable. It was clear this was more than just a rough start. This was a glimpse into what my future held if something didn't change. Living with Michael started to feel like I was in one of those dramatic TV shows where the cracks slowly start showing in the perfect facade. He worked at this fancy art gallery, which sounded posh until you realized his paycheck was as unpredictable as the weather in spring. Meanwhile, I was doing pretty well for myself, pulling in enough to keep us comfortable, living in a spacious apartment in a nice part of the city. I remember one evening, the conversation at dinner turned towards the future. I was talking about maybe, eventually, wanting to buy a house, have a bit of space for when we decided to start a family. Michael, fork halfway to his mouth, paused and gave me this look. "Lena, I'm not sure where you're getting these ideas from. We don't need a house. And me getting another job? That's not on the table." I put my fork down, trying to keep my voice level. "It's not about needing, Michael. It's about planning for the future. And it wouldn't hurt to have a more stable income, you know?" He laughed, a sound that used to warm my heart but now just grated on my nerves. "You and your obsession with money. It's always about the bottom line with you, isn't it? Money isn't everything, Lena." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "Easy for you to say when you're not the one worrying about paying the bills every month. I'm not obsessed with money. I just don't want to end up struggling." Michael shrugged, going back to his food like we were discussing the weather. "I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied." I stood up, my appetite gone. "Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than just criticism about how I manage ours." He didn't look up. "I contribute in other ways. Not everything is about money, Lena." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the house or the kids or even the money. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which seemed to matter to Michael as long as the status quo kept his life easy. His accusations of my so-called obsession with money were a convenient deflection from his unwillingness to confront the reality of our situation. On what started as a mundane Sunday, the living room transformed into the stage for an unexpected drama when Evelyn, my not-so-beloved mother-in-law, decided it was the perfect day for a visit. With her arrival came an air of tension, thick enough to slice through. She was glued to her phone, her voice fluctuating between panic and confusion, as she navigated through a conversation that set off every red flag in my book. "And you're saying my social security number has been suspended? How much do I need to pay to fix this?" Evelyn's voice cracked as she fumbled through her purse, pulling out her checkbook and a slew of documents, her hand shaking with a mix of age and fear. I was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, when my ears picked up the mention of Social Security and payment. Years on the force had honed my instincts, and every fiber of my being screamed, "Scam." I rushed into the living room, my approach silent but swift. "Evelyn, hang up the phone. It's a scam," I interjected, my voice firm yet composed, hoping to convey urgency without inciting panic. She whipped around, eyes wide with shock and offense. I beg your pardon. I'm handling this, Lena. There's no need for your intrusion. But before she could continue her protest, I reached out, my hand clamping down on the phone, and ended the call with a decisive click. The room fell into a stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Evelyn recoiled as if I had slapped her, her face contorting into an expression of fury and disbelief. How dare you? That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. Who do you think you are, treating me like some naive child? Michael, drawn into the living room by the commotion, stood at the threshold, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. Lena, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother? I turned to him, my frustration mounting. That call was from scammers, Michael. They were trying to con Evelyn out of her money by claiming her social security number was suspended. This is a common tactic. I've seen it 100 times. Michael rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I knew meant he was in a tight spot. Okay, but couldn't you have been a bit more diplomatic about it? Evelyn, gathering her things with trembling hands, shot me a look that could curdle milk. I don't need to be saved, especially not by someone who treats me with such disrespect. I'm leaving. We'll see what the bank says about this so-called scam. She stormed out, leaving a cold silence in her wake. Michael sighed, looking between the door and me. Lena, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother. I felt a twinge of guilt, but stood my ground. I know it seemed harsh, but there wasn't time for pleasantries. Scammers rely on creating a sense of urgency. Hesitation could have cost her dearly. The next day, curiosity and a hint of guilt nudged me to call Evelyn. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice cold and clipped. What do you want, Lena? I just wanted to check in after yesterday. Did you talk to the bank about the call? There was a pause, and when she spoke, her voice was laced with reluctant admission. Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam. But that doesn't change how you handled the situation. You were rude and aggressive. I pinched the bridge of my nose, a headache brewing at the edge of my temples. I'm sorry if I came across that way. I was just trying to protect you from getting scammed. These people are professional liars, and they're very good at what they do. Her response was a scoff, tinged with a begrudging sort of gratitude. Well, I suppose I should thank you for preventing a mistake. But don't think this means I approve of your methods or your attitude. Goodbye, Lena. The chill between Michael and me had settled in deep, turning our home into more of a frosty standoff than a warm haven. I clung to the hope that his upcoming birthday might thaw the ice, a chance to fan the dying embers of our relationship. Dreaming of a weekend filled with just the two of us, I planned every detail, hoping to rekindle what was once there. But as fate, or rather, Evelyn, would have it, she bulldozed through my plans with her own agenda, setting up a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, of all times. Knowing my schedule was jam-packed, it felt like a deliberate jab. I pleaded with her over the phone. Can't we just push it to Saturday? I'm swamped at work, Evelyn. Her voice was a mix of honey and ice. No, dear. This is when it's happening. Michael shouldn't have to adjust his birthday around your occupations. Biting back frustration, I found myself confiding in my boss, the only person who seemed to get it. He's seen enough deceit and betrayal to fill a noir novel, yet he understood the importance of this gesture. Go, he urged, with a knowing look. Do what you need to do. Arriving at Evelyn's, the party was in full swing, a spectacle of faux merriment. Evelyn spotted me like a shark senses blood, her smile tight as she hastily whispered something to Michael. There he was, Michael, my husband, ensconced by the fireplace, his arm around a woman who was clearly more than just a casual acquaintance. My heart twisted, but I steeled myself and approached. Michael, aren't you going to introduce me? I asked, injecting a calm I didn't feel into my voice. He jerked like he'd been electrocuted, his eyes wide. Ah, Lena, this is Aisha from the gallery, he mumbled, then turned to her. And this is, Lena, a relative. The room might as well have spun. A relative? Seriously, Michael? Your wife, remember? I couldn't keep the incredulity and anger from my voice, the words echoing louder than intended. A hush fell over the room, all eyes on us. Michael's face reddened, a mixture of embarrassment and irritation flashing across his features. "You know, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority," he retorted sharply, turning away as if dismissing me from his presence. Before I could recover, Evelyn slithered over, her voice dripping with disdain. "You see, Lena, you just don't fit in here. Michael needs someone supportive, like Aisha, not, whatever this is." Her words were a slap, each one designed to cut. "I think it's best if you leave. You're clearly not wanted here," she hissed, gesturing towards the door as if banishing me from my own life. "You know what, Evelyn? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong in a family that thrives on lies and deception." With dignity I barely felt, I walked out, the silence of the night wrapping around me like a cold embrace. After the debacle at Michael's birthday and the cold truth that followed, I knew I needed solid proof if I was going to end this marriage on my terms. The thought of tailing Michael myself was too much. I'm used to digging up dirt on strangers, not the man I once thought I'd grow old with. So, I turned to Dave, a colleague of mine with a knack for uncovering the most discreet affairs. "Hey, Dave, I need a favor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady over the phone. "Anything for you. What's up?" His reply was immediate, the loyalty in his voice a small comfort in my storm of betrayal. "It's Michael. I know he's seeing someone. I need evidence," I confessed, feeling a mix of relief and dread admitting it out loud. "Say no more. I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have what you need in no time," Dave assured me, his confidence soothing some of my anxiety. True to his word, Dave delivered. Photos, audio clips, the works. It was damning. The woman, Aisha, was indeed more than just a colleague. Worse, she was here illegally, looking for a quick marriage to secure her status. She was also a fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Michael, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him squirm. But then I remembered the condescending remarks, his dismissive attitude, and that smug look he always had. No, he didn't deserve my concern or my help. Filing for divorce felt like ripping off a band-aid on a wound that had been festering for too long. I demanded financial compensation for his betrayal. It was the least he could do after everything. The fallout was explosive. Evelyn, ever the dragon lady, took his side, painting me as the villain. But I stood my ground, fueled by the evidence and the injustice of their accusations. The ink on the divorce papers wasn't just dry, it was a testament to a new chapter one was desperate to write for myself. Opening my own detective agency wasn't just a dream come true, it was a rebirth, a new dawn, from the ashes of my past life with Michael. The agency quickly gained a reputation for discretion and effectiveness, a reflection of the lessons learned from my personal saga. One day, as the sun poured into my new office, illuminating the framed license on the wall, Jessie, my right-hand woman and friend, popped her head in. "Boss lady, you've got a minute? We've got a potential big case. A woman suspecting her husband of having an affair. Wants the full works, surveillance, photos, the lot." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. "Sounds like our bread and butter. Do we have details?" Jessie nodded, laying the file on my desk. "Yeah, but there's a catch. She's got a tight budget. Really tight." I thought about it for a moment. This was my chance to pay it forward, to help someone who was possibly in the same boat I'd been in not so long ago. Tell her we'll work with her budget. And Jess, let's make sure we're thorough. I know too well what it's like being on the other side of this conversation. Jessie's grin was wide. "Knew you'd say that. You're a good person, you know that?" "Try telling that to my ex," I quipped, but the jest didn't reach my eyes. The case was as straightforward as it gets in our line of work. Infidelity, secrets, and lies, a pattern I'd become all too familiar with. But with each case we closed, I felt a piece of myself heal, a validation of my decision to start anew. One morning, as the city was slowly waking up, an elderly lady stormed into my office, her frustration palpable. She was ranting to my receptionist about her son's wife who had apparently vanished with a considerable amount of money, leaving them in financial ruin. She insisted on speaking with the owner, mentioning something about needing a payment plan. Curious, I decided to meet her myself. Imagine my surprise when I came face to face with Evelyn, my former mother-in-law. The shock in her eyes mirrored mine, but embarrassment quickly took over her features. "I run this agency, Evelyn. How can I help?" I managed to say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Recognition dawned on her, followed by a flicker of shame. But, true to form, she recovered quickly, her desperation making her bold. "Lena, you have to help me find her, the woman who ran off with my son's money. Michael's in shambles. Do it for family's sake, without charge." The audacity of her request left me speechless for a moment. The same woman who sided with Michael without a second thought now stood in my office, asking for a favor as if the past had never happened. "Evelyn, first, we're not family. Second, I run a business, not a charity for wayward ex-in-laws," I responded, my tone firm. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me, but I wasn't about to let old wounds dictate my decisions. "But Lena, after everything, can't you do this one thing? It's the least you could do," she pressed, her voice a mix of plea and demand. I couldn't help but laugh, albeit bitterly. "The least I could do? Evelyn, after your son cheated on me, you expected me to just forgive and forget? I suggest you go to the police. They're better equipped to handle missing persons and fraud." She stood there, flabbergasted, as if the thought of me refusing her had never crossed her mind. "But Lena." "No, Evelyn. I learned a valuable lesson from Michael and from you, never to trust scammers and liars." "It's time you learned the same," I interrupted, my decision final. Life indeed comes full circle, but it's up to us to decide how we close that loop. For me, it was by standing firm in my values and looking forward, not back. A week had barely passed since Evelyn's little episode in my office when my phone buzzed with a number I'd thought I'd erased from my life. Michael. Seeing his name flash on the screen was like stepping back into a world I'd left behind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Michael, what do you want?" My tone was guarded, ready for whatever spiel he had prepared. "Lena, I've been thinking, a lot. I want us to start over, get back together. Have kids, you know?" His voice had that old familiar blend of hope and something I once mistook for sincerity. I couldn't help but let out a snort. "Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours?" There was a hint of excitement in his reply. "Oh, it's all planned out. We'll live with my mom at first. Save some money, then you can buy us a big house. It'll be perfect." I laughed, louder this time, the absurdity of the situation hitting me full force. "You're just as arrogant as ever, Michael. You think I'd come back, just to play house with you and your mom, and then foot the bill for a big house?" He stumbled over his words, the desperation clear in his voice. "But Lena, I've changed. We can fix everything. Please." The silence stretched between us as I considered the years wasted, the tears shed, and the painstaking journey to rebuild myself from the ruins he'd left behind. "Michael, you haven't changed a bit. Goodbye." With that, I hung up, the finality of the gesture sealing the door on the past. As the silence settled around me, a sense of peace enveloped my heart. The call, absurd as it was, served as the ultimate validation of my growth, my resilience, and my independence. I had built a new life, a successful career, and reclaimed my sense of self, none of which would have been possible had I stayed trapped in a marriage that diminished me. Michael's call was nothing more than a blip on the radar, a fleeting reminder of how far I'd come. The future stretched out before me, bright and filled with promise, a blank canvas ready to be painted with new dreams, new challenges, and new achievements. As I turned my attention back to the work that had given me purpose and a sense of belonging, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. After all, the best revenge is living well, and I intended to do just that.